We filmed in Mexico for 3 months in a place called Puerto Venturas. It's like near Cancun, and it was amazing. But yeah, it was rough. I mean, it's super hot out there. There's humidity super high. The way the house is set up, it's just there's no AC anywhere. So it was just. I mean, it was
It
a
looked
lot of fun.
gorgeous, but yeah,
Yeah,
you
it,
can
it really
tell.
does. It's gorgeous down there. It's absolutely beautiful. Like as soon as you step outside your door, you're immediately drenched in sweat. But you look out and you're like, oh well, it's gorgeous though. So it's
And you
nice.
still sound the same.
Pretty much. I think it's gotten a little deeper. That's about it. Just a little
But
deeper.
hello everyone, welcome to an episode of The Box Cutter, where this month it's Latino Heritage Month, and we are doing a 4-part retrospective on the brothers Garcia. And as a special treat, I have done my work, and I feel like it's paid off. And with me today, my co-host is actor from The Brothers Garcia and upcoming HBO Max revamp, The Garcias, Mr. Bobby Gonzalez. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm nervous, but I'm not nervous. Just because seeing you on TV, it's like you grow up and I grew up watching Disney and Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network, and a lot of the time it was a majority of my upbringing, it was a lot of white actors. Having you come on to the podcast and whatnot, it made me very excited because it's like, I feel like I've definitely accomplished with what little I started with, which was a microphone, and that's pretty much it.
Well, that means a lot to me because whenever you're doing something, even as a kid, I guess once it was over and I got older, I'm like, did this mean anything to anybody? And just to hear, honestly, it's simple enough of being like, I got to see somebody that looked like me on television means so much for me to hear. That it means like, okay, the show made a difference, the show mattered, that feels really good. So thank you for that.
I guess let's start from the very, very beginning of performing. What inspired you to want to perform?
Wow, yeah. So when I was a kid, I grew up. My parents are immigrants. They came from Cuba, and starting off in this country was tough. It's hard to make money. My parents were trying to become doctors, but there was a lot of work that went into that. So I was, left with my aunt or my grandmother or somebody to watch me, and they had to do their own things. So I spent most of the day in front of the television, just watching movies, watching television shows, and when my parents would get home, I would act out everything that I saw in the day. And that idea of performing it and it being received just sparked something in me. So at 6, 7, 8 years old or something, I told my mom I want to be an actor, and my mom was trying to be a psychiatrist at the time. She's a psychiatrist now, and so she was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, you want to be an actor?" And I'm like, and I kept going, and she's like, "Okay, well, this is a phase. Let me put him in acting classes." And I think I was too young for it, and the teacher, and my mom went to the teacher, and she said, look, I know he's too young, just let him go for one day, and at the end of the day, just tell him that, to come back next year or something. And I went, I did the class, my mom shows up, she's like, did you tell him? And he said, yeah, so if you could bring him back next week, that would be great, I want to keep working with him. My mom was like, oh, okay. And then it just went from there to him just, telling my mom, oh, you got to get an agent. And then I started booking jobs, and my mom was like, maybe this isn't a phase. And my parents were really supportive, even though they doubted it at first, because acting is such a crazy thing to go into, especially at such a young age. But my mom was supportive enough to fly out with me to Los Angeles, where it was pilot season, and one of the auditions was for the Brothers Garcia, and then it just went from there.
Wow. So you must have been around, let's say, 8 years old? 9 years old?
It was 8 or 9, something like that.
I could tell only because I'm an educator, so when people say they're too young, I kind of can figure out more or less how old people were when they started to do things. So, just a shot in the dark. But
Yeah.
wow, so just the fact that you were so encapsulated by television, and you were just so outgoing and showing your parents. And what's interesting is that I was more of the opposite, where when no one was around, I loved performing. But as soon as people are around and they want me to be in the spotlight, I was very much, I don't want to. Um, but then when I got older, it was quite the opposite of, oh, I want to do this. And everyone else was like, no, you don't. And so I did everything I want to. I performed at karate tournaments and I did dancing. I did dancing in college. And now I have this podcast. So,
So you're doing it.
I'm doing it my way, no agent and whatnot. That's not what this is for. It's more of a passion project type of,
Absolutely.
thing.
Those are the best projects.
So you got the pilot, and you shot the pilot, and the show itself, I feel it was it's very much overlooked. There were so many big stars from that were starting out their career or were big at the time on that show, and yet everyone it's not streaming anywhere, and it's like you can't really find it except if you look really hard on like YouTube or like the other third party streaming sites or whatever.
You got to go searching for it. That's true. But yeah, we had a lot of great guest stars on the show. George Lopez, was on the show. Vanessa Hudgens was on there. Camille, who was great. Ricardo Montalban, who I got to work with. We had just
that was the last episode.
Yeah. Which we didn't know was going to be our last episode, but it was an absolute pleasure. Since I'm Cuban, like the fact that Ricardo played a Cuban trumpeter, trumpet something,
El trompeta.
El trompeta, who like his country and going through the story for that. But it's the story. The show was pretty big at the time. Even though we didn't get promoted a lot, but we kept showing up on these lists, and our ratings were always high. I don't know why it's not streaming anywhere. I think something may be in the works for that, as far as the old episodes go. But yeah, it's a little bizarre. It kind of just was really hot and then just kind of disappeared, as things do. But as things are coming back and as I'm seeing older shows show up on the streaming, I'm a little confused myself why ours hasn't come up.
Yeah, I still think it's a very timeless kind of format. I know it was at the early 2000s when like the internet started becoming a big thing, and CD, then boy band, and so but even then, I was able to watch all 4 seasons, plus the So Bad It's Good Mystery of the Mayas movie. And
I love that one so much. That's a great way to describe it.
And I just feel like it's still good. It shows functional Hispanic family living in San Antonio with 2 parents, one that runs their own business and one that's a Chicano study professor. And and it had these undertones of like faith and family, and it's like you most of the time when they talk about church and other shows, it's like Protestant, white, all this stuff. But on Brothers Garcia, it gave more insight into the Catholic religion. Things like Lent and the saints and La Virgen, and it wasn't like over the head preachy about whatever. It was like that's what I liked about it. It wasn't preachy. It was just like it came out so natural, and being like Mexican, growing up with Mexican parents, a lot of the stuff I really related back to my own experiences growing up. This show, it predicted a lot of what was to come. Like Lorena was very much a activist, and that's what the culture kind of turned into, and your character became very much into we're into technology and the internet, and the internet's part of our culture, and Carlos being more about his looks and whatnot, again part of our culture, and Larry's character of being studious and very much about science and whatnot, and space travel, and a lot of it was on the nose of what was to come within the next 20 years, and look where we are now.
I honestly never looked at it like that, but when you say it like that, yeah, that's all accurate. Wow. I mean, it's funny. Leading up to the show, I went back and I saw it again, and I didn't see all that stuff. So, thank you for that, because I get to see it in a new lens. But, oh wow, you just blew my mind with that. That's crazy. Especially with like the Lorena activism thing. That's nuts. Yeah, I mean, and we have in the new series we have a lot of that stuff that too. Like that stuff carries through. One of my nieces was also very inspired by my youngest brother Larry to go into science. And now I'm just playing through the season in my head. I'm like, are we predicting anything in the future there? But I thought I had a point, but really my mind is just reeling with what you said. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just like playing through everything in my head and just trying to see it all, and kind of wondering I'm trying to find a reason or a way that happened, but the show was really just trying to tell a slice of life comedy about a regular, family that happened to be Mexican. Not a regular Mexican, just a family. We just happen to be Mexican. That's it. We just are. And there's been so many shows like that, in regards to white families, that they stopped doing those shows, and they started to have to, it had to have some sort of gimmick or some sort of twist or something, dramatic or something. And for in our culture, we didn't even get the first part. So the show was really just that, and it exists. And maybe that's one of the reasons that it's timeless. It's because it doesn't try to do anything, of the times or have any sort of gimmicks. It just exists as it is. We're just a family. We're going through our lives. Sometimes we get into fights. Sometimes we get into little misadventures. But really, we're just trying to live out our lives and be happy and make each other happy and exist.
Yeah, that's what. And what's interesting is that when you pointed out like the typical white family, it's like the typical white family. You have the jock, and then the girly girl daughter, and then the prankster baby sibling. But in comparison to the brothers Garcia, all of you were very different from like the stereotypical, primetime family. You had Carlos, which, he was more about being cool and popular in his looks, and you were all about your technology and internet, and Lorena, all about her chismes and novelas and activism, and Larry, all about space and and all that stuff. And it's so interesting that that they didn't go the stereotypical route of the jock or like the prissy girly girl sister, and like the prankish up to no good brother and all that stuff, and it's refreshing to see that.
Yeah, I think that had to do with the fact that Jeff Valdez, who was creator of the show, executive producer of that show and the new one, what he cared the most about was chemistry. Like, did we look like a family? Were we believably a family? Did we all work together? Did we have that sort of compassion for each other, the empathy, the love, but also like, the playfulness where we'll like, joke with each other, mess with each other. And because of that, he, wasn't trying to, put people in these little boxes. He just wanted to have a sort of idea of what the characters were, and then who we were as people sort of defined the characters. So Jeffrey, for example, is, he's a cool guy. He just is. He's one of those people, it's just like anything he does is just kind of cool. It's just sort of his demeanor. But he's not a jock. He's not, he's not somebody that's going to go and, be a linebacker or anything like that. He's just like a cool guy that sort of exists. He's very funny and compassionate. Sometimes he can, be silly or uncoordinated or something, and there's humor from that. And my character, I was kind of, nerdy and into technology, and I, wanted I played a lot of video games, or kind of wanted like the latest computer and understand how like everything worked. As a kid, like take apart a radio, how does it work, and then try to put it back together, but never actually could. But and I think the characters were just really inspired by who we are, and the characters as it went, through time, they grew with us, and so I wasn't really playing a character. I wasn't really being George. I was really just being myself because George and I were so similar, and I think the rest of the cast felt similarly. And hopping back into the new series that's coming out, I sort of had to figure out. I'm like, all right, well, I'm a lot different from George now. Like the person who I am now is nothing like the person who I was when I did the show. Some of my interests are different. The way I view the world is different, and I had to look, it's like, how is George? Well, George in the new series is incredibly wealthy. He stuck with the technology thing, kind of kicking myself for not doing that, and made a lot of money. Has a family, and I had to sort of figure out. I'm like, okay, so like, what's important to him now? Where do my feelings with him still align? And go through that. And I think in the new series as well, like we don't have sort of anybody in these stereotypical boxes. I don't think we still have a jock or anything like that. And all the children's interests, while they might mirror members of the family, very much go in their own way. And some go vastly different to anything that we've seen before, but still, represents, people I know in my family.
Yeah. And that's, like I said, that's interesting and refreshing to see because, seeing the show, growing up with it, it's like, yeah, they look just like my family, except they're actually functional and they do things together. And it's like, sometimes at first when I was a lot younger, I really was, envious of those who had that type of family. But then I just learned to appreciate the fact that my family is of strong individuals, and even though we're a very small family that lives here in California, and most of our family's in Mexico, it's a thing of, at a young age we found out who we were, and and up to now, with all of our experience and our struggles, and it's helped us to mature and go and grow up and go through experiences, and it paid off because now we're like that more as a family. Didn't start out like that, but we worked towards it, and now I live as a family with my brother and my sister and my mom, just like how the Garcias do. So I feel like I did get my fairy tale wish come true.
Well, that's great. Yeah, I mean, I think the show is a bit, to me, a bit idealistic. This is how we see our families on our best days. And there's a lot of ways about the show is like our family wants to be like this, but life will get in the way. I mean, just the fact of something that was big in the show was the family dinners or family breakfast. Everybody sitting around the table having dinner and going through their day and talking and joking and laughing. And I have fond memories like that with my family, but they didn't happen every day. It was impossible. Either my parents were working late trying to do something, or my sister had to, be at her job or something. So whenever we had those family dinners, it did feel like they did in the show. And, as I've gotten older, they would happen like, maybe once a week, maybe sometimes once a month. Maybe it would only be during holidays. But I can watch the show and I can be like, yeah, that's what it's like when my family, gets to sit around the table and I have all of those fond memories. And I wish we could have done it more, but life gets in the way, and I think that's what it is. I think the show shows us as we are on our best days, and sometimes sometimes how we are on our worst days when we get into fights and stuff. But I think the show is beautiful for that. It shows us at our best.
Yeah, and it's like, it was very much about family at the end of it, regardless of if you got into fights and whatnot at the end of the day, or if you weren't talking to someone for like a long while. At the end of the day, you put it all aside, you figure it all out, yeah, and you sit down and break bread, and you care for each other at the end of it all.
Yeah. That being said, as far as the new series goes, there's going to be some. There's going to be some challenging things. It's very much still a family show, but just to preface what I'm about to say, but there are going to be some challenging things that occur that really test the bond of, kinship and family, and whether or not a family can continue through their problems. I'm talking about two particular characters. I don't know how much I'm actually allowed to talk about it, but yeah, there's. I think when we were doing the show back in the day, episodics were very much the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Every episode gets tied up at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Every now and then we'd have a two-parter or a three-parter or something like that, but usually that's how it goes. Whereas the new series, it's very much just one story continuously told over the course of 10 episodes. And some episodes have a bit more of an episodic feel, but the individual stories that are happening with the characters take place over that larger narrative. So if some characters get into a fight, they might be in a fight for most of the season, and if it gets you'll see whether or not it gets resolved or not.
Mm.
But yeah, which happens in family. I've had family members that I didn't talk to for, months, sometimes years, and fall out of contact, and then have to rebuild. Have to remember we are family. Have to put aside our differences, or just talk things out and work things through, because at the end of the day, I'm always going to have their back. They're always going to have mine. That's very much family too. We don't always get along, but we're always family.
Yeah, very, very well put. And so after filming wrapped up on the Brother Garcia and the TV movie, what was the after effect of everything? Where did you go from there, or like what changed between you and your alter ego of George Garcia leading up to the Garcias?
So, after the show was wrapped, after we did our last season, I very much still wanted to act, but I also wanted to finish school, at least high school, which I'd barely been in at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, I moved to New York, was briefly at NYU, and then just went to the Lee Strasberg Theater and Film Institute. I learned method there. I did a bunch of plays and stuff, went back home and lived in Miami for a while, which is where I'm originally from. And I kind of just bounced around, taking a whole bunch of different acting classes all over, just any acting class I could walk into. I just wanted to learn every single way of doing it, whether it be method or Adler or Uta Hagen, Meisner, whatever. And at that point, I started writing as well. I started doing stand-up comedy. I started doing sketch comedy, improv. I just wanted to always just be on a stage or in front of an audience, or in front of a camera, anything, improv, whatever it was. And I was, I was living. I wasn't, making a large deal of money, but I was able to survive. And one day out of the blue, Jeff Valdez just called me, and I was like, "Hey, great to hear from you. What's up?" And he was saying, "Hey, I'm trying to bring the show back." And I'm like, "Which show?" And he was like, the Rose Garcia. I'm like, "Really?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I'm like, that would be amazing. I absolutely, sign me up if you still want me. We're going to be ourselves. What's going to happen? And he talked me through it, how it was going to work, how our families had changed. And I felt, as he was talking, like I was watching like an old photo album. It was just playing in my head as if I could see the memories on there, George being married, George having a daughter, Carlos getting married and having 2 kids and all that. And it took another 3 years after that where I was just in this sort of limbo of is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? How much of my life should I continue? How many, opportunities should I let slide by because they would be commitments that would get in the way of this? And I just had to, keep the faith that it was going to happen. And it did. And it finally did. And up until even going to film it, I was like, is this really happening? Is this really happening? And then getting to Mexico and seeing my castmates again, meeting, my TV wife, meeting my TV daughter, meeting my nieces, nephews, and all that. Seeing Ada Maris and Carlos LaCamera again, who play my mother and father, who were just amazing actors that were such good role models on me, and I still think of them as like a mother and a father, was nuts. And then they said action, and then it was like I was home. It seemed like it hadn't been 20 years since we filmed the show. It seemed like I had seen these people 2 weeks ago. That's how long it felt. It just felt so natural. And luckily, my first scene was with Jeffrey Lycon, who plays my brother Carlos, and we neither of us knew how it was going to go, but that brotherhood between us, that feeling of like he's my big brother, I'm his little brother, and that like protective instinct from him, and that kind of like just jokey buddy instinct from me, just really just informed everything we did, and it just felt like we'd never stop doing it.
Wow. I mean, I wish I had those feelings. Most of the time, I just feel like I'm attached from the world. And when I see someone I haven't seen in a long time, it's like, oh, hey, how are you? So, I mean, it's great to hear, you experience those feelings of, like, you're home. Like you've never left. Just that feeling of home. As they say, home is where the heart is. And,
Yeah.
Speaking of your TV parents, they just seemed like, I love the fact that the show actually gave the parents some time, like, some camera time, and like some actual struggles of like getting by or like marital issues when it could have just been just the four of you, but they actually spent time with mom and dad.
Yeah. I mean, I think when you have two actors and two comedians that are as talented as they are, I mean, you gotta give them something to do. It would be a waste otherwise. I mean, everything I pretty much know about comedy came from Carlos LaCamera. I mean, he taught me like pratfalls and physical comedy, as well as timing and how to work on bits. And Ada is just, I mean, she is just a force. Like that woman can do absolutely anything that she wants, and yeah, I mean, absolutely, we needed to look into their things just to be able to really use them, and they have pretty big roles in the upcoming series as well. They're a very big part of it. Their stories are really interesting, and I think the show's always somebody for all ages, and I really think that people who are empty nesters, people who, I mean, I can't relate to it, but, people who have had their kids leave and sort of, like, trying to figure out what is life like now will find something that they can relate to in their plot, in their story.
And so what would you say, like, for you, when you filmed Brothers Garcia, what would you say is your standout episode?
I mean, for me, it was the very last episode we ever filmed where, I mentioned I worked with Ricardo Montalban, who I never went to my dressing room if I could help it, because I would just sit there and I would like listen to him talk about acting or his life or the world, and I was just like, I mean, I had like a notebook in the scene, and I was just sitting there like writing down. I'm like, yep, all right, that's great advice. Yeah, and I should do what? Oh yeah, absolutely. And he was just an absolute pleasure to work with. The story talked about Cuba and Cubans having escaped from the regime. And that's not something I ever see enough of in Hollywood, on film or in television. And so that was nice, since I'm Cuban, to really be a part of a story like that. And I just thought that he was hilarious. And that story allowed me to do some drama as well. And so that was my favorite one. And I mean, luckily it's the one that's freshest in my mind, since it's the last one we ever did.
Yeah, I mean, he just has such a voice, like the Dos Equis man, or like who else am I thinking of that everyone tries to imitate?
Oh, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's just he has a very commanding presence to him. He has like an authority. I mean, it's just sort of like, if there's some sort of disaster going on and like everybody's freaking out, and if you hear that voice telling you to do things, everybody's just going to turn around and be like, yeah, what do I got to do? Grab the rope? Yeah, got the rope. All right, whatever you want. Like, it's just a very commanding authority, commanding presence.
Yeah, and I'd say my standout episode is probably the one where uh, Sonia, Ida Maurice, she is trying to recreate the spicy salsa for um, Ray, Carlos,
Yeah.
and 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 she tries to learn from your TV grandma, and just the whole thing of like they're in the moment where grandma says, I just didn't ever teach you because you just didn't seem interested. It just really, I just have a soft spot for that episode because it was just like, my mom makes the best like tamales. Like she sells every holiday, and she always sells out, or gets too many orders, and it's like neither my brother nor my sister nor I really know how to make them. We've seen her make them and we've helped her make them, and I really wanted to and spent some time with her, but it's like it just makes me sad because it's like the whole Mihai, you never seemed really invested when grandma told your TV mom about that. It's like it made me feel kind of guilty of the fact that these are great, and it's like when the time comes where she leaves for another life, I won't have that comforting thing that would be made on my birthday that was so special to me. So it very much, that's my favorite episode because some families or siblings or members of families just blow off their heritage, or are in denial of being Mexican or Hispanic or Cuban, and when you want to remember those times, it's like, why was I not more caring about, why didn't I care to be more a part of my heritage?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because the way it worked in my family was not the reverse, but just different in the sense that I didn't have a mother who had all these secret recipes that she would cook, because
Mm-hmm.
my mom was the person who didn't listen to her mom about the recipes.
Mm-hmm.
So my mom, the joke is that my mom burns every single like rice grain she ever tries to make. My mom just like never learned how to cook, doesn't care about it, isn't great at it. My dad, did most of the cooking when I was growing up. And that's fine, but my grandmother is an amazing cook. I just to me, Cuban food is what my grandmother makes. I don't care what all the rest of it is. What my grandmother makes, that's Cuban food. And so my sister my sister and I are 13 years apart, so she's much older than me. So when I was pretty young, my sister was already 18, 19, whatever. She went to my completely just went around my mom and went straight to my grandma and was like, okay, I'm gonna sit down. I have a notepad. Let's go through every single dish you know how to make. Teach me how to make everything. And I'm so grateful to her for having done that, because she did. My sister has note cards to this day. Like, she hasn't digitized them at all. They're actual note cards from however many, 25, 30 years ago or something. And it is my family's history on those cards. When I want to make ropa vieja, for example, I'll call up my
Mm-hmm.
sister. I'll be like, Nerlin, can you send me abuela's recipe? And then she'll send me a photo of the note card, and it's just like, okay, it's this and this and this, and then of course, because my abuela didn't didn't have exact measurements. So it'd be a pinch of this, a little of that, not like a tablespoon, teaspoon. No, there's no tablespoons, teaspoon measurements or cup or this and that. It's a little bit of that, a lot of this. It's you just got to measure with your heart. That's how you can figure it out. But I'm able to make these dishes that my grandmother used to make, and it's not the same, because there's again not having the measurements the same, but also just because I think anybody, when they cook, they add a little bit of themselves into it. Even if two people follow the recipes exactly the same, there's going to be something a little different.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'm having when I eat the ropa vieja or whatever other dish is, it's a piece of me and it's a piece of my grandmother, and it's our shared history now. And now when I have kids, if they want to cook and they're like, I want to have Cuban food or make this or make that, I can then pass on what my grandmother gave to us, and that's nice.
Yeah, it is nice. I mean, my mom was the one that taught me how to cook to start, and I learned a lot of stuff from her, even though my relationship and her were very similar, but we butt heads so much because we're too similar. But at the same time, I just have so much admiration for her because, well, I mean, I could have been probably not where I am now making this podcast. I could have been, I don't know, a dropout at a dead end job and not getting my college education, but it was a thing of, she never enabled me or babied me. She told me if you want something, if you want that thing that you want, you need to buy it yourself. If if this is what you want, you need to, if you fail, then you gotta do it again and do it right. You gotta fix what you're doing now so that way you do it better the next time if you fail. Or, it's not a big deal if you didn't get it. So, it's like, I love her to the moon and back, but by goodness, sometimes she just frustrates me so much because we're just so similar. But I just appreciate just how similar we are in the same sense.
Yeah. Ain't that just the thing though that you would think that the person you would get along best with would be like a copy of yourself. But the truth is that whenever anybody is that similar to you, you just can't stand them. And it's nuts. Because I still believe I'm like, man, if I could find like me as like, if I could just clone me, I was like, me and him would be like the best of friends. But probably hate each other. I'd be so annoyed by every little thing that like I don't see in myself, or the things that I do see in myself. Oh yeah, I can't. Yeah, that stuff messes me up.
Yeah, I mean, my best friend and I, he's an Aries, I'm a Capricorn. He's very lax, I'm very organized and get things done. He's very, I'll do it later, I'll leave it there. And yet we get along so well, and we bring out the dumbness in each other, and he helps me relax, and I help him to get things done. It's like, we're so opposite, and people are like, that's your best friend? I'm like, yeah, that's my best friend. And I always start, whenever I talk about him, I was like, he's my best friend. So...
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about like filling in the gaps. Like I think for any two people in any sort of relationship, whether it be like platonic friendship or the person you marry or something, it almost needs to be like opposite personalities with mutual interests. Like you're interested in the same things and you have
like
the same
you
morals
and
and
you and
ideas.
Jeffrey.
Yeah, I mean, Jeffrey and I are basically complete opposites. From the ground up. Uh, but I think it is about like filling in the gaps. There's the things about him that I don't have, things about me that he doesn't have, that it just allows us to like really just bond and just love being with each other and working with each other.
So, the Garcia then, I'm excited for it. And, you say it takes place in Mexico, which interestingly enough is where the TV movie, The Mystery of the Mayas, took place too. In Cancun, I believe, yes?
Yes,
And so,
we filmed in Chichen Itza and Cancun.
yeah, and so how, how was your experience with all that?
Um, I remember when I was going down there. I mean, obviously, I thought about the movie. The movie was so much fun to film. It was the first time I'd ever been in another country. It was one of my favorite experiences being in another country because I could actually speak the language. And everyone down there was just so friendly, especially in Chichen Itza. I mean, everyone was friendly, but in Chichen Itza, the people there were just amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really excited to go back down there. And, we got down there and it's the same. Everybody is so friendly. Everyone is so kind and helpful and super excited about the show. And everything is beautiful down there. I remember we went on a boat one time, on the weekend when we weren't filming. And we were, in Cancun. We were going out. And I flipped out because I saw the hotel we filmed at when we did the movie. Because it was like shaped like a pyramid and like there was like ruins near it. And it was just this like crazy like wave of nostalgia and all these memories kept flooding back. And I think really the way I was able to sort of enjoy what we had done previously, like in the Mysteries of the Maya movie, was seeing how all of the kids were reacting. My daughter on the show, my nieces, my nephew, and seeing how much they were enjoying it, and just remembering like, oh, okay, yeah, when I was, you know, their age and we were doing this, like, this is how I felt, and it just felt nice. It felt nice to see that they were getting all of these memories that they will have with them for the rest of their lives, these friendships they'll have with them for the rest of their lives, and it was really, I don't know, it kind of just brought everything full circle.
Has anyone ever just come up to you and just like told you or like messaged you or left comments to you on social media or in person just saying, you know, I loved Brothers Garcia and you know, you guys, you're just like, you were the coolest people growing up and whatnot?
So, I mean, as far as in person, the only one that I can sort of really remember, because, you know, a lot of stuff happened when the show was being made, you know, and my face was a little bit more recognizable. You know, I'd have people come up, and mostly what they would do is they would just ask for autographs. When I was older and living in New York, I mean, I must have been, you know, somewhere in my mid-20s. I was at a grocery store, and I'm just minding my business. And at this point, I look like I do now. My hair is longer, I got a beard, and and it was winter, so I'm all bundled up and stuff too. And I just remember there was this kid. I mean, he looked like he was, you know, a teenager, you know, maybe 15, 16. And he just, you know, kind of like turned and like saw me and then looked away. And then looked back, and his jaw just dropped. And he was just like staring at me. And I was like, no way he like remembers me from the show. This was years ago. And he like, you know, he like taps his mom. And he was like, Mom. Yo, that's the guy from Bobby Garcia. And at that point, I was like, oh, okay. I'm like, yo, what's up, man? And he was like, oh, and he just like gasped, and then he came up, and I talked to him, and he didn't, you know, outright say like, oh, this show, but like it was, you know, in the way that he acted, like clearly, you know, this show, you know, meant something to him. And as far as not in person, I mean, I don't, until very recently, I didn't really have social media, but when, you know, a couple years back, for whatever reason, I hadn't seen the show in years. And I was like, all right, you know, let me try and see if I can, like, see some episodes. Let me see what this was like. I think somebody in my life, maybe a friend or something, was like, I want to see your show. And I'm like, all right, well, you know, like, let me find it, and then I'll send it to you or something. And I went through, and, like, I saw an episode, and I was like, oh, man, like, wow, this, you know, the show still makes me laugh. Like, I'm still enjoying it. And I went, and I was like, oh, let me see the comments. And I went, and I started scrolling through the comments, and there was just this overwhelming, like, love and support of people just being like, I think my favorite one is this reminds me of my family. I think that's the one that means the most to me, because that's what we want to do. Or, you know, somebody, you know, would be like, oh, you know, like, I didn't think that I could, you know, do a certain thing with my life, and this, you know, just, you know, seeing these, you know, the fact that they got a Latin American show on television just let me feel like I could do it. You know, like, comments that were like that. And I would just go through, and I would watch the next episode back into the comments section, just over and over and over and over and over again. And honestly, I mean, you know, through that, if I was ever having a bad day, I'm like, let me go read these comment sections, and then just like see it. I'm like, oh my god, these people are so nice. And that it really meant a lot to me, because when I was doing the show, I didn't realize how important it was in regards to representation. You know, I had been already working a lot. It was mostly, you know, Spanish language things. And I was like, just cool, I got a television show. It wasn't until Jeff Valdez started to talk about, you know, like, how groundbreaking the show was, you know, the fact that we were the first, the first Latin American show on cable primetime. That we can actually say. There's other shows that came before us, like Que Pasa USA, that was a sitcom on American television, but which is also a great show. But I didn't realize it until then, and then when I was trying to act after that, and mostly being sent for jobs that were inmate 5, or, you know, ex-con, or drug dealer, or, you know, like, things like that, where I was like, oh, wow, we have a really big problem, not just in representation, because we're barely represented in Hollywood, period, but even the representation that we get is not showing us in a good light. It's not the proper representation. It's not showing us as we are. It's showing us as, I mean, unfortunately, as some people think we are, and then as the villains that Hollywood has grown so accustomed to making us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'll tell you, two of the nicest people I have ever met in my entire life are Danny Trejo and Emilio Rivera. They're two of the nicest people I've ever met in my entire life. And they're always, and like, good for them, though, for working as much as they do, but Hollywood is constantly casting them as these villains or, something like that. And at the end of the day, they're breaking apart the industry from the inside.
Mm-hmm.
And I like all the power to them. But when we actually do have Emilio Rivera in an episode of the Garcias coming up, where he's not playing any sort of villain, and it's we're trying to make more room of like, yes, we will always be down to play these characters. These are fun characters to play. As an actor, I would love to do any of the roles that Emilio and Danny do, but we also need to be able to do the other characters, the characters that everybody else gets to play, that we that represent us as we are, or just as the heroes of the story, or just as just regular people. And so like that's what's important. It's not just about representation, it's about the proper representation, the right representation.
Yeah, and the early 2000s, again reiterating, had a lot of shows with good representation of all sorts of minorities. You got the Brothers Garcia, George Lopez. You had stuff like the Parkers and other things
Taina.
showing Taina, exactly. All these shows showing Hispanics and blacks and Asians in good in as regular people who have personalities beyond the flanderization that we're given, like the nerdy Asian or whatnot. It's like these shows showed us as like, we can be funny and we have our struggles and we're just like everyone else, and we laugh and we cry and we get upset. We aren't just these one personality things. So it's like, I just feel, I'm glad that this revamp is happening, but I just also feel it's a little unfair that people are not going to know, oh, what, the Garcias is a revamp? Oh, I didn't know that they had a show before that. I never seen the Brothers Garcia. So it's like, I feel it's a little unfair in that regard, but whatever we can get, we gotta run as far as we can with it. So if we got the Garcia, then I hope people love it, and I hope it'll get another season or whatnot, and hopefully it'll start to garner some attention to the Brothers Garcia.
Yeah, I mean, look, as far as people never having heard about the show, I mean, there's a million reasons besides the show wasn't promoted enough. There's a million reasons why they may have never seen it. They might have been too young for it, too old for it. It was only on during this kind of like limited period. You have to be kind of in like the right age group, and then to have seen it. But I mean, we're hoping for like a lot of new people, and the show stands on its own. You don't have to know the original series. I think you probably get a little bit more out of it. But I just would love for people to just give it a shot. Just go, if you got an HBO Max subscription, you're not paying anything extra. Just go watch an episode, and I think if people stick around for that episode, I think they'll really enjoy it. And I'm really proud of what we did. I think the episodes, I've already seen a rough cut of I think the first 3 or 4 episodes, and I love how they came out. I think they're really funny, but they also have just so much heart in them that I think if people give it a shot, I think they'll really like it, and I think they'll continue to watch it. I'm absolutely hoping for a second season, but whatever happens, I'm proud of what we did. And you're absolutely right, because we are funny. And I mean, I just recently met with a lot of Latino comedians. There's this show called the Hot Comedy Festival that was in San Antonio, and we just filmed the most recent one for this year. And we have Liz Alvarado and Chingo Bling, just so many hilarious comedians. Emilio Rivera was part of it. Paul Rodriguez Sr. was the host, and that show is really great because it gives there's a platform like, all right, like here we are, it's us, like it's a show that's just for us. It's for everybody, but it's made by us. But also we on the show we are branching out also into the inclusion of the AAPI community. Carlos or Jeffrey's wife on the show is Korean American, played by Elsha Kim, who is a phenomenal actor and a newcomer to the show. Nancy Lee plays her mother, so Jeffrey's mother-in-law on the show, and she was also at the comedy festival. She's hilarious, and it's just at the end of the day, because we're also not just trying to find representation, we're also trying, if we have an opportunity to work, we want to include whoever else we can too, because we have been excluded from so much. Who would we be if we were to exclude anybody else? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that's been something that's really important too. I mean, my nieces on the show are both, the actors and the characters are both mixed Latino and Asian American.
There you go. And it's great, to see that, our community, as well as other minorities, we're starting to be inclusive, not just be like, oh, this is a show for us. You won't get it if you're not one of us. It's like, no, as long as you're open-minded, you'll like it. Yeah. And, where we've gone in 20 years, it's like, just so fast we've gone in 20 years from, like, just a bunch of one minority is the focus to now we have mixed families.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's beautiful.
I think it's really important, and, like, I think the way that we look at it is, it's not a show for us. It's a show from us. Mm-hmm. It's for everybody. Mm-hmm. Like, we hope that anybody who had a sort of negative view of us in their minds, maybe it's just because of how media has portrayed us, will look at it and be like, oh, okay, like, I was wrong. This is, they're either just like us, or they, but they have this completely different culture to my own, and all that. Like, we're hoping everybody can see it and enjoy it and just really kind of get to know us. Like, we're kind of like a very small sample of our larger culture. It's just like, hey, we're going to give you some of the stuff from our culture. We're going to introduce you to it. We're going to let you be a part of it, and we hope you like it. And then with that sort of inclusion, then we're hoping it'll as well as break down walls, also mend fences.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So if you want to give that special someone in your life a Christmas present, get them an HBO Max subscription of $7.49, I believe. They dropped the price.
No idea. But worth every penny.
It seems so. There's a lot of good stuff on there. You got Clueless and whatnot. This is not an ad for them. I'm not being paid. I'm just saying.
I'm being paid.
If you love the Brothers Garcia, and you love supporting our community of Hispanics and Latinos, get yourself an HBO Max subscription, and hopefully around December, fingers crossed, the Garcias premiered on HBO Max. So, Bobby, thank you so much. Just just making time, and sharing your personal life and your thoughts and your feelings and whatnot. Is there any last minute thoughts or anything you'd like to share or plug?
No, man, I think that's pretty much it. I just want to say this has been an absolute pleasure. It's been wonderful speaking to you. Thank you so much for, just giving me an opportunity to just talk about me. Because, I love everybody, but I love me a lot. And I like talking about me. So it's been fun.
Yeah, so make sure to leave a comment if you like what you hear. Why not subscribe on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, YouTube, and Spotify. Send all suggestions and feedback to theboxcutterpodcast@gmail.com, because it takes a village to raise something beautiful. In the words of Larry Garcia, todo para la familia, everything for the family.